Okay. Yeah. So Somatic-Imaginal is on the model. It's the meeting of soul and form. And yeah, cultivating presence by practicing expression. And so for me, there's something in that and in the phrase Somatic-Imaginal that captures, it's almost like a looking at it from different angles, it captures sort of like this feeling of how experience is a conversation between sort of our bodies and our physicalities and this more sort of abstract realm of like metaphor or imagination or yeah, kind of soul. And it feels like this, to me it's like this aspect of experience is incredibly rich, because if I think about the triangle model, it's almost like the term Somatic-Imaginal, it's kind of like right from the bottom, the body, right up to the soul. It's like the full thing. Yeah, it's like bringing in the whole of your being. And I often think about imaginal practice and like working with this sort of like embodied imagination as a kind of, it's almost like the metaphor I have for it. It's like a yeah, like a bridge or a sort of like, maybe a bridge is too fixed. It's more maybe like a liquid that's sort of like very fluid and can kind of yeah, get pass through like and create connection between things. There's a sense of connections being made between the inside, the outside, between people, between different parts of experience, and just sort of like creating, yeah, a more whole expression of us. That's
Yeah.
new things.
I can't remember if I was just talking about this yesterday or if it was in my dream last night. But at some point, I was, yeah, going back through how even the word imaginal, people use it many different ways. It kind of gets thrown all over the place when people use it. But there's one thing that basically everyone's definition shares in common, and it is some sense of like being in between. It is an intermediary thing. It moves between things. It is the space between things. It is the interface between things. And yeah, like you can't escape liminality when you're in the imaginal state. Yeah. So this is one of my favorite things about like somatic imaginal practice and talking about it, expressing it, soaking in it is like for a lot of like the other box that I'm covering in the 16 box model, myth and metaphor, that can be an incredibly deep and embodied practice that ties together everything else, just as every box can be that thing. Every practice can bring in everything. But some of them lend themselves much easier to it, and some of them you kind of got to tinker with them and move them around to get them to do that. And like myth and metaphor, for example, moves pretty easily towards just mental ideation if you're not being careful with it, if you're not like actively trying to open and loosen it up from that. Somatic imaginal for me, like it's almost inescapable to cover everything else. Like you said, it's like the bottom and the top of that pyramid. And part of me always pictures that as like a torus, just like the donut shape of like, yeah, and the top
Mm.
connects directly back to the bottom. Dive deep enough into the body, you find soul and imaginal again. Ascend far enough through the soul and imaginal, you're back in the body. And everything between them, the mind, the heart, everything about your being. Like you can't avoid bringing all of it in when you're starting from a somatic imaginal lens. And that's helpful for me because I'm a forgetful person who is not good at consistency with things. And yeah, like the two directions that you've got on that model, like practice paths and cultivation paths. I think somatic imaginal is like the end of the first row for the cultivation path. And that feels about right to me. It's the first thing that has to include everything, and that just by cultivating it, like you're gonna have to include everything else at some point if you just keep cultivating from there. And there's less of a like 1 hour of embodied practice per day and like note your heart and then move into your hara center and then also check your imaginal, move through your dreams, do this. Like, no, just stay in this one thing, keep cultivating it, and it's just going to move to everything else. It's just going to do it, right?
Yes, totally. I think it's an interesting, yeah, the thing you're bringing in there. I think there's a way that when you describe that, I can see that it's like to do any of them properly, you have to, or fully, you have to bring in all the other aspects. But I think that it's almost like, as you describe that, it's kind of like a lot of them in their, yeah, for example, the like later ones, you get a lot of people doing them in a way that has a lot of like spiritual bypassing behind it, or a lot of the mental, the like mind, their ones become just very mental. And it's almost like this, yeah, the reason the model goes in this order and the Somatic-Imaginal is early is because this is the like the where you can be in the interconnection, in the relationship, in the in-between. And it's almost like if you haven't got that piece, if you haven't like grokked that, you end up staying separate in when you're kind of like in each bit. And so yeah, it's almost like seeing the vitalness of this ingredient.
There's certain things that tend to group together. This might be fun to try and diagram out sometime, actually. But like, if you start with X, whatever box that's going to be, it moves pretty naturally towards like this one and this one and includes this one. And those kind of bundle together really naturally. But it takes a bit more of like a remember this to get it to spread out beyond those. And I think there's several different versions, like overlapping versions of that we could point at within those 16 boxes. And yeah, connected to the same thing from I said earlier about the imaginal, like it is connective tissue. It is in between this. It is just the thing that reaches to get everything moving and pushing and pulling together. And especially when you connect that to like right from the start to the somatic aspect of your being, you bring that into the body so that you're directly sensing and perceiving these things instead of doing it from kind of that mental place of like, oh, I can see how like meta relates to jhana. Now I'm gonna like think really hard about how that works and try to bring that. No, it's in the body. It is in that connective tissue. It is already on the move and doing its thing. Yeah, it's just so natural and organic. I love it.
Yeah, right.
It just moves. It just goes. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And I think like then, for example, I was just wondering about giving a specific example. And I think the thing you said about metta and jhana, it's like if you bring the Somatic-Imaginal into your metta practice and you're like feeling into connecting with love, like feeling those pleasant sensations in your body, allowing that to express itself through imagery, through just like felt senses. It's almost like the difference then between metta and jhana, or like early jhana, is like there's no difference. You've kind of like just matched them then, because you're just sort of like soaking in, you're very absorbed and soaking in the energies and the vibes and the yeah. And I just thought that's a nice example of that connective tissue.
Yeah. And that's funny because like my own journey with meta stuff first off started fairly explicitly imaginal. The only thing that worked for me was like because they give a bunch of those different props of like, okay, find someone who's like easy to love, find like an animal that's easy to love, find anything where you can feel and generate this love for the thing and start there. Nothing really worked particularly well for me until I did kind of an imaginal exercise of just like, remember that everyone has had multiple endless lifetimes and that at some point everyone was incarnated as a cat. and all cats deserve love. So even if you can't love this person, love the cat that they once were in a previous lifetime. I was like, yep, that nails it. Now I got it.
Yeah.
And once I found just like that little trickle inroad, what really worked was, yeah, that kind of more jhana-y somatic aspect of it, where I basically drop into meditation, first drop into somatic meditation, and then just drop like the word love down into my heart, down into my gut, down into like the middle, the central channel of the body, essentially. And yeah, like with as much as I could put on it, of just like love, love. And that basically just exploded my body in vibrating, joyful, dense energy. And I was like, okay, now we got it. I can find my way back to this somatic marker. And that's just a thing that I'm like able to do now. And yeah, very much like PT first jhana type stuff of just like, okay, it's everything's like vibrating and you're totally in it and it's just like there and oh my God, love is everything. And then get out and go back to my day and only love cats. That's the rhythm.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's great. It's so nice as well. Like when you're saying that, I think there's just what is it? Just such a full and rich and like nourishing part of experience, isn't it? The Somatic-Imaginal. And there's
Mm.
a way that I don't know, let's have a look at the model. Like some of the other ones feel sort of like, I guess they're doing the opposite. They're bringing kind of like lightness and like spaciousness, which,
Mm.
yeah, particularly the kind of strong Buddhist-y ones, it's a sort of like, it's like a, I guess to do do the Somatic-Imaginal, kind of like creating a bit of this, which can, ease suffering as the Buddhists talk about a lot. But this is more like, it's more like really being in experience. It's really like, yeah, the next box along is Eros.
Yeah.
The next one kind of like on that is into being. It's like very connected, very rich, very nourishing, very like being in the roots of experience, which I love.
Yeah, that's pointing at a complex of ideas that I point at a lot that I really love. My favorite bit of it is James Hillman. It's always get back to James Hillman with me, but he draws a soul spirit distinction, which also comes across pretty well as like immanent and transcendent. I know in Eastern body, Western mind, they had like ascending and descending currents with up towards liberation and down towards manifestation. And yeah, there's just a lot of ways to phrase this where there's two essential currents, and one of them is, oh yeah, the tantric sutric divide,
Mhm.
regardless of how like real, unreal it is, kind of points in the same direction. Where yeah, there's just some inclinations that move much more towards immanence. What is here? What is now? What is sacred within what is already right here? And then others that point more towards like, how can I get like above this, kind of look from like an aerial view and get this like clarity and lightness and this rarefied air of seeing the pattern from above, so on. And yeah, it's almost like the meta view of being above and kind of looking down and seeing the patterns from above, and then the more infra view of just like embodying from beneath and being a part of it and being there with it. And yeah, those two need to like move together and marry a little more, but like I think everyone belongs to one or the other. I don't think it's
Mm.
something that like, what was it? Henri Corbin had a thing about how like he was born a Platonist just as others might be born materialists or atheists or Christian. And there's something to that about just like there is a philosophical or sacred inclination that is just built into your bones, and it's just where you belong. It is the gods that you belong to from the moment you're conceived. And yeah, some of us are just more on the like soul, immanence, density, depth, all that stuff. And
Mhm.
some people just from the start are like, no, no, I'm up here. I'm rarefied air, seeing the patterns, moving through, looking from above. Just kind of who everyone is. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's something nice in finding your resonance. I think part of part of the model in this, there's like almost like two things. One is like the importance of including the ecosystem so that
Mm-hmm.
people don't just go down their rabbit hole and think that's it's all just that. And then the other side is embracing your going down your rabbit hole and like finding the thing that is like your resonance and your kind of like, oh, this is me. And I think that's part of the Somatic-Imaginal. It's trusting that from like a life perspective, but also from a moment to moment perspective. It's like feeling and trusting the natural way that your body, heart, and mind is like how experience is flowing through you. Like what are the things that you're resonating with? What are the things that you're sort of like co-creating with your imagination, your kind of like like soul sense of meaning and all of those things.
Yeah. I mean, what was I forget the thing. For this box, it's like practicing embodying presence through practicing expression or something like that.
Cultivating presence through practicing
Cultivating
expression.
presence
Yeah.
by practicing. I mean, right there, yeah, you just express and express what is there to express, what is present to express. And at a certain point, you notice, oh, this is the type of person I am. This is the soul that I was furnished with. And that's what it is. That's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's just I don't know, like I have come to a noticing of the profound uselessness of attempting to be anyone other than that,
Mm.
essentially. And, I was young, as all people are young, and spent a bunch of time. I need to be this type of person, or I'm going to be this person, or I want to do that, or be that. And, a lot of that just drops away with age. But a lot of it just really dropped entirely and just shed off with more somatic imaginal work. Because, yeah, just like, what am I going to do? Try to be like this other type of person? No, that's not what I'm doing. I spent like a full year in Korea just being a separate type of person who I like thought I was supposed to be because
Mm.
cultural conditioning, family, whatever, whatever. And I was good at it. And that was like a weirdly nice experience to be like, oh, I'm good at being this type of person. I can be this type of person. And now I'm totally free to just like let go of that. And then every time it came up since in like meditation and work and anything, I've just been like more able to notice that of like, oh, I can drop that. I could move in that direction and try to be that thing. There's no need to. I'm like, I know the thing that I am.
Yeah. That's nice as well, because that brings in a bit of the relational aspect. I mean, a lot of this model is kind of focusing on your individual practice, but from a relational perspective, this is interesting. It's like there's a way I often have this realization when I'm talking with you. I'm like, oh yeah, I can just be myself. That's happened quite profoundly, at least
That does come up a lot, yeah.
at least 3 times. Where I've just been like talking about something and then just been like, oh shit, yeah, I can just be myself. And there's something kind of like magical with the Somatic-Imaginal, where the things that you've processed, the things that you've embodied, the things that you've kind of like integrated in your being, you're sort of then just naturally kind of resonating and becoming it's in the subtle ways of your language and how you hold yourself and the energies and all the things that like the infra things. I really like the language that you use around that meta and infra. It's like the infra-ness of your being. You're just like sharing that and resonating it out to people, and then other people get to sort of like receive that and be like, oh yeah, I can have that too. And I think that a lot of that Somatic-Imaginal practice, it feels to me almost like making the kind of that sort of like infra layer that's often invisible, like infrared light, I guess. It's almost like allowing a way to see that and connect with it and engage with it. It's like really going so deeply in that you can yeah, it's almost like I guess it normally comes out in dreams and like subconscious messaging and things like that, but it's kind of like making a practice to make that stuff visible.
Yeah, communicating this like infra aspect of just like what are the patterns beneath things, to put it in the other language that I really like, of just like what gods do you belong to, what archetypes are just woven into your bones, and now just express those. They're already there, just allow them to keep finding expression. That is not a particularly common or commonly expressed view. That is not a thing that has a whole lot of language about it, or that, I mean, yeah, back to the soul spirit distinction. One of the core things James Hillman says about the, infra, meta, soul, spirit is like when we move towards abstraction, towards putting things into language, laying them out as concepts, all of that, that is already in the language of spirit. We're already moving towards that. And a lot of this soul stuff needs to be expressed in image and felt sense and just allowing it to come up. So it does make it difficult to express large parts of this because everyone is so used to this like metaview of like, okay, how can I look down from above and see all of the stuff and then take what I want from it, basically.
Yeah.
And like my work doesn't lend itself particularly well to that. It's much more, yeah, going one-on-one with someone and just like, all right, let's see if we can notice the shape of your soul. And they pull up the little notebook and they're just like, right, so what are like the top 3 to 5 methods for noticing the shape of one's soul, right? It's like, cool. Tell you what, let's just feel your feet for a minute. Can you feel your feet? What do your knees feel like? What's happening in your gut, your hips? Anything there? It's like buzzy. I don't know. So would you say like meta meditation, or should I be trying this jhana stuff, or like the can you feel your knees?
Yeah. And then people are like, oh shit, there's a jungle in my knees or something.
Yeah. Once you can kind of break through, they're just like, why are there like warring plant kingdoms in my thigh? That's not the type of thing that is in a thigh. Like, right? Good. Follow that. What's the conflict? What's happening there? Yeah, I feel like I
yeah.
don't know, a good foil for this is like Ken Wilber's stuff, where it's just so, he's got all of the maps and all of the models and always just this top down, like, it's just like the stereotype of the 22-year-old guy who comes to spirituality and just like reads through all of the Ken Wilber and just thinks and thinks about all these maps and loves them all. And oh my God, the spiral dynamics. So it's like if you're orange, but then you got to get to yellow, but like green sucks. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to jump straight to yellow. And there's just a lot of this up here energy. And that, like, everyone kind of gets used to that because that's the main energy that is reified in our culture. That's the one that everyone wants and does. And it's much harder to do the type of thing where it's just, what is present already, and how can what is present find expression through you? And then they ask you, cool, so what is present? Like, look at me, and what is present that I should express? Like, I don't know, man. Let's find it.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. The thing you said about what gods do you belong to? What was I think what's really nice about that is that often I think the shift in, because for example, one of the things I talk about is that Buddhism does not include the Somatic-Imaginal. And then people go, oh yeah, but it was really shamanic and there was loads of magic and there was this and there was this. Or like, yeah, but all these traditions have always had all this storytelling and da-da-da-da. And it's true, the Somatic-Imaginal has always been there. It'll always be there. You can't escape it.
Yeah.
But I think the difference is in what's happened since Jung and Hillman and those people is it's become a much more individualized aspect of experience, where before you were given your gods from the religion that you were part of. It was like, this is the experience,
Yeah.
whereas now it's a much more,
Here's how to do the deity yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, not to say that those things, you know, if those are the things that resonate with you, do them. They're rich and meaningful ways of engaging with this stuff. But it's like the actual truth and essence of it is inside you. And it's like
Mhm.
your expression. It doesn't need to fit in a box of
Yeah.
this religion, this type of practices, these images coming up. If anything, the liberation in it is like, oh shit, everything's showing me all these different images all the time. And the kind of like that, like unleashing the somatic-imaginal, to me feels like just, it's almost like an expression of liberation and action. It's just like freeing stuff up. It's like naturally goes towards creating more space, more freedom of expression. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
allowing that.
No,
Um
I'm just agreeing. Like,
cool. Okay.
yeah.
Yes.
No, it has become like a running gag with me over the past several years how like there's certain aspects of the somatic-imaginal and of just basic practice in that area, whatever the like version of that is that's just like encoded in humans to seek. How many people just reinvent it from first principles on their own? And like it's the same conversation every time. I cannot count how many times I've seen this, but someone will come in and just like, oh yeah, like I was doing, whatever, these different types of psychotechnologies and meditations and psycho spiritual work, whatever. And I brought it all together into like this kind of thing where I've been doing this and moving towards this. And then someone else will just be like, oh, right, you mean like these five other things from ancient traditions, and this thing that my buddy John invented, and this thing that's a new psychological type of therapy. That thing. And they're like, okay, yep, I guess exactly that. And like, yeah, humans only do the same seven things over and over again, and we will find them again. But I do think there's something to that where like a lot of aspects of Buddhism crushed a lot of these aspects of spiritual practice out and like put intentional effort into like, don't do that, don't pay attention to that, we're going over here. In the soul spirit divide, it's very much Buddhism is hardcore spirit tradition. Like, I mean, yeah, anatta literally means no soul.
Yeah.
Don't do the soul thing, right? But yeah, then you move it up to Tibet, and they're just like, "Oh, this sounds all familiar. Let's throw it in with our shamanic tradition. That's just like pure soul." And like that's still like you look back through their histories, and that was fairly controversial with a lot of the like Buddhist priests of the time. Just like, no, don't mix it with the Bon stuff. Don't do it. They're like, no, we're gonna do it. But and then yeah, nowadays that gets used as the example of just like, oh no, like Buddhism does include this like soul work stuff. Look at the Tibetan deity yoga and all this stuff. Like, yeah, but that's like despite the Buddhism that came into Tibet, they had to like forcibly re-include it to bring it back down to today.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's something in the soul, in what you were just describing about people putting the same things together and figuring that out. There's something in the soul realm that is about individuation, like the kind of all the Jungian stuff around individuation, like integrating your anima, integrating your animus, yeah, becoming your unique expression in the world. It's like, I think that has always been present in the history of spirituality, but it's been very rare because it's been the mystics. It's been the kind of people who've gone off and done their individual thing and sort of left the tribe and kind of explored their own connection with the divine, I guess, and become expressions of that. And I think what is important, what is like happening now, is that people have because of the way that knowledge is so accessible and distributed, the internet, people can connect with each other, people have more individual resource, they're not as bound by cultural, like societal pressures and things like that. It's almost like it's possible for everyone to be a mystic and everyone to kind of like find their own innate individual connection with the divine, with the, and that's not I think if that's immature, it can be a bit sort of like pick a mixy, just kind of like faux spirituality. But I think when it's really mature and people are really doing the work and showing up in their unique expression, then it's much more powerful.
Yeah, there's a thing here culturally as well where like, because yeah, this has been a part of religious, spiritual, human culture forever. Even looking back at the stories of like, all of creation is Brahman and we are all expressions of that. And culturally, there part of it does seem right that like, yes, it has to be the weirdos who go off on their own and do some stuff. But also a whole lot of if we kind of take that artificial divide of like soul work and spirit work pushed out the soul in tons of cultures again and again and again, that we're only allowed to do this higher, rarefied, purer stuff. And this lower stuff is evil and get out of there, don't do it. And so it left the realm of anything that we would recognize culturally as spirituality, as religious work. But like, I don't know, you go to a punk rock concert and everyone's there just like chanting and screaming and they've got their hair all crazy and their conversations afterwards are all about like who they are and what they're doing and how the art just wants to come through them, and like soul is very present there. And yeah, there's a lot of immature expression of soul, particularly I think because a lot of it has been culturally separated for so long from anything recognizable as growth, development, spirituality, connection with creation. I mean, literally creation, creativity, it's all there. And yeah, that is, I think Vivid Void said something about this a few days ago, how like one of the sad parts of, AI generated art and stuff is that we are now taking away and moving away from one of the few spiritual traditions available that people can make a living at. Like artists who just like sink into their art and do it and make it and become what is there and like express what is coming through their pen, brush, whatever. Oh yeah, just how there was already so little room in the culture for like, especially non-commercial artists, for artists who are doing this as like a path of individuation and expression and soul. And yeah, just expressing what is present through not just the actual art that they produce, but through the whole way of life that they bring to that, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
already so
totally.
little room for that in the world. And yeah, a lot of the AI art stuff is going to create significantly less space for that to be a thing. Unless we as a culture evolve towards something, I don't know, UBI or some sort
Yeah.
of like we all take care of each other, and cultural advances actually advance things for the lives of the people in that culture and not
Yeah.
just for the 8 people who took everyone else's work and turned it into their.
Yeah, that's actually that I was going to say as an alternative perspective, um, in terms of AI art, I feel like actually it's been a huge, it's suddenly, it's sort of democratized art in a way where suddenly everyone has a way to express themselves in a very easy way. And there's a sort of, I think a lot of people have the idea that they're not creative. They've learned from school that they can't paint, they can't draw. That's like a really stressful experience for a lot of people. And suddenly it's like they can create these beautiful images that express something. And that to me, like, yeah, taking care around, because I think there's something in the depth of really living the thing that is meaningful, and making sure that that doesn't get destroyed is important. But yeah, I actually think one of the best examples of how AI art is good is like the Tending the Shimmer article that you wrote, because it's
Yeah,
like
that was helpful.
suddenly it's like we're all, and this feels like a metaphor as well for what the somatic-imaginal unlocks for people, because it's like there's a way that energy body images, if you Google energy body or look into any kind of like
Yeah.
traditions, or it's like you'll get the same tropes, and different traditions will have different ones. So you have like, very tantric infused ones, or you got sort of like new agey ones with 7 chakras in certain colors. And like, it's like these very kind of fixed ways of relating to your inner world. And then it's like through this article, you're kind of describing, I guess, to people how actually it's about just connecting with what's on the inside and the energies and the vibes and the kind of like subtle shimmer, and like this, just paying attention to that and allowing that to grow. And then to illustrate this, have created images that are much more just like normal people, in the way that you and I are having a conversation now, but there's like energies on the inside that are kind of like, and you can feel it and you can feel the vibes. And it's sort of like the images are much more reflective of people walking down the street, but having a bit of a like glow around them, or being connected to their heart. And there's something in that which is, it's like the expression of using the art for you to illustrate something that you've like deeply grasped, and an expression of it, rather than like to pick up some pre-existing idea. But also there's something fractal in it, where that's also the thing that we're talking about like the kind of like coming from the inside out way of being,
expressing what is present.
Yeah.
And just for anyone who has not seen that, I've got an article called Tending the Shimmer, where like, I have a bunch of illustrations that are the usual. If you Google energy body, and you'll just get a bunch of people who are like made of light, and they've got a shining crown chakra, and they look like X-Men characters, basically, and some final boss that the X-Men are going to fight. And then to juxtapose with that, I just created some images of like someone chilling on the couch with like a shimmer moving through their chest, or someone shopping for groceries with just a big thing of green energy kind of hanging around their gut and stuff like that. Which seems to, I think that's my most read and most popular article of all time, I believe. And something about that did seem to connect with people who, hate energy body talk, hate chakra talk. And I'm like, yeah, me too. It is very badly communicated what the hell they mean by any of this. Partly because, the visuals that are all there, the thing that they're expressing is not a thing that is really in anyone's experience. It's, again, this top-down view of just like, well, if we look across all cultures and blah, 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 like there tend to be certain spots. So we'll just make like shining dots on those spots and it'll be fine. Where for most people, most of the time, the thing that we're talking about is just like, oh yeah, my chest feels like really kind of like collapsed, and like there's a lot of sensation like towards the front of this, connected with a sense of despair and kind of a numbness behind me. And so you've got like a dark blue thing on the front that looks pretty dense, and then just emptiness behind. And cool, you've expressed it. You've gotten there. You're good.
Yeah. Now you can be present. Because I think that's the thing. It's almost like it's like, what my classic example of this is that if there's like a challenging emotion for people, it's like they spend a huge amount of their time just avoiding that. And then if you bring in a kind of like the Somatic-Imaginal just has such a power to make things possible, like rather than just like feeling sad and thinking that's good or bad, you can be like, there's like an ocean of sadness that I feel connected to. And then it's neither good nor bad, it's just present, and you can just be present.
It's there.
And you can also, if you're doing practice, explore that further. So you can be like, what type of ocean is it? Is it like a lovely tropical island green ocean? Is it like a really stormy, like middle of the Atlantic, huge waves kind of ocean? Like and you can like, what creatures are in the ocean? You sort of suddenly end up with this world to kind of like explore and engage with the thing. And
my favorite part.
Sorry, go on.
No, my favorite bit of guiding people through stuff like that is just them noticing what is already present there that they'd never noticed before. So like the what's under, like what type of ocean is it thing. I was just like, it's just oh, okay, stormy and it's off the coast of this place where I grew up. Okay, yeah, it's there. Then you're like, all right, is there anything like in there, under there? What's it going on? It's just the surface of the, oh no, there's something in there. And like it was already there. And they're just kind of by asking the question, by putting the prompt in, they're just like getting more of a sense of, all right, this is like a really dense buried ball of emotion that came up specifically because of this set of interactions last week. Okay, now I know where to begin being present with it. Like you're no longer just avoiding it, denying that it exists, not having it in your awareness at all. It's there. And a lot of the time, that's literally enough to just like, oh, it's there. It found me. Let's sit with that for a while and it will get on the move. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree. When you can show people that that's part of their experience, it's already there, and like the
Just the
fun
way
of,
their face lights up. Yeah.
yeah, 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 and the fun of like the endless details and richness of it. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think the way you were just describing it, it's like very much a thing that you're receiving from yourself.
Mhm.
That's already there. I think just
That's
really
one of the core confusions that I see a lot from people who haven't experienced a lot of it. Is the like, it's a near enemy of like daydreaming imagination stuff, right? Where people's usual connotations, experiences with imagination and imaginative and imagistic stuff is like, oh yeah, I can kind of feel that coming together and like I'm guiding it and creating it and making it and all that stuff. And the thing that we're talking about is very much not that, where it's just more like turning the corner in a city and like suddenly, oh, there's a building and people here, and like it was already there. It was always there. You just turned the corner and are looking at it now. And yeah, it's not like a creating it, making it come together, ideating it. When you feel like that's happening, that's a good chance to just like drop it and see what's actually already there. But
yeah,
yeah, I see that confusion all the time. Just like,
yeah,
what good does it do to just like imagine my emotions? Fine, my emotions are a sad bird. There, does that help? I'm like, no, because it wasn't there. You're creating it. And can you see the
yeah,
other thing that we're doing, where you're just noticing what's already present? And that is
right.
like kind of the first gap to get over. You got to get people to like take that leap and notice the things that are there before they can start noticing further. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like if the mind gets too involved,
Mm-hmm.
it gets either too like controlly or a bit passive aggressive or like things like that.
Yeah.
And you want to be really holding it with a like open hand and
Yeah.
like allowing things to bubble up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny with the ocean imagery one. I met someone one time who was like, kept having ocean imagery. And when they tried to like feel into like, what does it mean? What are you? And stuff, the ocean would like start raging and moving fast and like kind of kick them out of it. And they'd like get lost out in a, just lost out again. And they figured out over time, like, oh, right, like it doesn't want to be interpreted and poked at and like doesn't want my mind looking at it and trying to dissect it. It just wants to be present. It wants to be there. And then the ocean stopped getting all wavy and kicking them out, and it could just be there. Yeah, the passive aggressive thing always amuses me. Like, yeah, man, the unconscious is alive. It's there. It's it has thoughts and opinions about how you're treating it.
Yes, totally. I think one last thing that is cool to mention is or to say explicitly, I think we've kind of touched on it, is that the capacity for the imaginal to reach the shadows. I mean, it kind of is, and there's a way of relating to when you call the shadows more just like the subconscious. The whole thing is like really expressing that. But I think things that are difficult to be around, either the really positive things or the really challenging things, it just in the way that, yeah, I think if you're connected with that kind of like nice jhanic energy and just like allowing images to arise, there's something in the like the kind of like evocativeness, the beauty, the joy of creativity that allows more difficult things to be present and to be expressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot here, and I don't want to go too far, but one thing that does come up is that like a good working relationship between kind of the like bottom up, like infra view, and then the top down meta view feels very important in this area for a few reasons. One of which is, yeah, it gets much easier to, there's a certain amount of faith in just letting things express themselves and then noticing them as they come up. And there does need to be some function there of noticing, like, oh, this stuff that I'm expressing and bringing up should not be brought up in certain contexts or expressed in certain ways, or you know, I don't want a serial killer podcast to be made about me because I'm working through my psycho-spiritual dark material, right?
Yeah.
So there does need to be a bit of that like awareness on top of just like what's happening here. This is what we're working through. This is what it's connected to. Here are ways that we can like urge that effectively and keep it, keep safe spaces for its expression. Because yeah, it can get like too easy to express. Like once it has form and you've been present with what it is, it's there, and it's much less of that avoidant threat thing of just like no, 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 no. On the other hand, and here I'm going back to James Hillman again, the much more common danger. That first thing is not a real danger for most people. I only ever include it usually as like a legal disclaimer. Like, I'm going to tell you some stuff to give it out and try. Don't blame me. Like, you're talking to the cops later trying to defend whatever you were doing. Like, no, this guy told me to embody the sacred that's coming up from within me. Don't blame me. So that's uncommon. The much more common one is if the kind of top down, really like using your head at things is too present. There is a way of like depotentiating what's there and taking away its power, curing the symptom, and losing what is like really precious and expressive about that. Losing a lot of this self knowledge that you could gain from this shadow material just by, yeah, the classic James Hillman example is the like, you have a dream of a policeman chasing you and you wake up just like terrified, heart beating, like everything going on. And then you just say like, it's a guilt complex. Now I don't have to worry about it. I know what it is. I have labeled it. I have sorted it into the right drawer. Guilt complex. That's it. And that's a way of not being actually present with the police officer chasing you, the fear, the guilt, the shame that you feel as you wake up. That's all surfacing, coming out in that. It's a way of cutting that off and shutting it away. Yeah, all of which is just to say, yeah, balanced relationship between the expression of this stuff coming up and noticing what is coming up and having that presence of mind as well to let it happen, but not like 100% totally surrender to it. I think you said in our last conversation, like the total surrender thing can sometimes be a bit dissociative if it's not like discerning, not balanced, etc. This feels like another example of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like the Somatic-Imaginal. The truth in it is the inner world, and when you start emerging into behavior in the outer world, it's like, yeah, recognizing that has rules and limitations and expectations of you for a reason. Yeah, but I think when you were saying there's something in the kind of like Somatic-Imaginal expression where it's like, I've heard it describe the difference between a shaman and a psychosis is that the shaman knows to sort of keep the kind of like inner world, the like Somatic-Imaginal, magical, mystical stuff to only tell the right people, and the psychosis is sort of like exploding out everywhere. And I think one of the things that I would love in the world and that I'm really passionate about is the idea that there would be more safe places for people to explore this stuff. It becomes more normal. It's like, oh, actually everyone's a bit shamanic. Everyone's got this inside them. Let's all kind of like unlock this and be present with it in a way that is safe, because, and then you would have less intense, you'd have kind of like people on the far end of the spectrum who are like have ended up in distress and this stuff is like exploding out of them in healthy ways, would have a more kind of like healthy, full, rich way of being with that inner world. And then sort of people who are very normie and have kind of like shut all this down and are aversive and can't be present in their experience would come more into the like being able to really be present with the full richness of their inner world, their emotions, their innate like somatic imaginal nature.
Yeah, book we just mentioned earlier today, The Politics of Experience and the Birds of Paradise by R.D. Laing. The final chapter of that is a 10-day journey, and it's about a guy who essentially had a psychotic break, but he happened to be friends with like the head of the local insane asylum, basically. So he got to kind of choose his own experience as he went. He was like, I want to be in the padded room. It feels safer to like move around and thrash and punch or whatever in there, but I'd like the door open. I'd like to know that I can walk out into the hallway. And yeah, the nurse is just like, all right, fine, we'll do that. Do you want like some Thorazine to like help calm you down? No, that feels like it will completely interrupt the process that needs to happen here. And yeah, he just got to kind of guide his own psychotic experience. And yeah,
Relatable.
title of the chapter, 10-day journey. It took 10 days. He went through it, came out the other side. And yeah, it was just some artist hanging around England for the rest of his life. And it was fine.
Yeah.
And yeah, we don't really have that. You walk in, talk about half of this shit with even like your therapist. You cross certain lines with talking about psycho-spiritual material. That's a hard one to say. Coming up. And you get reported unpredictably for various things. I don't know all the rules about how they report things. I do know that I've heard some before and was shocked by them, of the things that people need to hold back from their therapists.
Yeah.
Isn't one of them like if you say you've been thinking of killing yourself, then they have to do something? I think this is America, not Britain, so you wouldn't know. Yeah, that one was, wherever that was shocking to me. I'm just like, if you can't talk to your therapist about having suicidal thoughts, like who the fuck can you talk to? And yet, that, but for everything.
Yeah. Suicide hotline for anyone who's wondering.
Yeah. Good practical advice. Yes.
And also, you can't, I've explored many avenues of where these things can be talked about, and there's lots of unspoken and spoken boundaries and limitations. And I'm very, I'm just passionate about this topic and freeing it up and making space.
Yeah.
For these things.
Just making it. Yeah, I feel like that's a big part of a lot of what we're doing and the people around us are doing, is even if you're not like gonna get into a bunch of this stuff or dedicate your life to somatic-imaginal practice and stuff, or go on shamanic retreats, if there's just a bit more cultural softening around it, it's like, okay, I know what that area of experience is kind of like, and it's a thing people do, et cetera, cool, right?
Yeah, the normalization and the enchantment and the aliveness and the richness and the all of that you're kind of like allowing in. Even just if people open to it a little more, there's like so much more richness that can come in.
I do have hope for a lot of this, just on the decriminalization of a lot of psychedelic stuff and the psychedelic therapy stuff coming on. Mixed feelings on a lot of like the particular uses and use cases and ways that it's treated, et cetera, qualms, quibbles, whatever. Broad picture, these aspects of experience becoming more normalized, becoming things that people generally know. Oh, right, my sister-in-law did an MDMA retreat. She said some wild things happened. Cool, good. You are familiarized with this basic area of experience.
Yeah.
And aren't going to think that people are wildly insane for talking about their experiences there.
Yes. And I think
just move the needle that far.
Yeah, totally. And I think what you were mentioning about the psychedelics, the psychedelics feels like a huge opportunity, but it links back a bit to the thing we were talking about at the start, where it's almost like to do any of the things on this model properly or like fully, there's a way that you're sort of like including the full spectrum and including the fullness of the whole thing.
Yeah.
It feels like psychedelics has that same thing where it's very easy to just narrow down with them and have a fixed idea about, oh, it's just changing my brain chemistry, or oh, it's like,
and just the like,
showing me
this is
these
the one.
experiences.
I found the things.
And
like, it's the closest thing we have to the God button, right? Just like push a button,
Yeah.
like, okay, I saw it. And yeah, I mean, it's almost a stereotype at this point of people just getting stuck there and not moving forward, not integrating a lot of the stuff. You just, okay, I did like 3 ayahuasca retreats this month, but I think the 4th one is what's really
that's gonna be the one.
kick my brain chemistry into full enlightenment, and now I'm gonna be good. Like,
Yeah.
no, man, go home and like, what was that you said about your last trip? That Mother Ayahuasca was angry at you for coming back so soon without integrating? Weird. Anyway, good luck at the one this week.
I feel like the Somatic-Imaginal world gives people the tools to really make the most of psychedelics. It's almost like psychedelics is like a turbo booster for this realm. But if you don't ever do anything else in this realm, you're sort of like putting a turbo booster
before we run out of time on the clock here, I do want to put out to just like anyone watching, I've put out feelers a couple times around this, but I should probably be doing it again, of like working with psychedelic retreats in some way, shape, or form. I'd love to see what some Somatic-Imaginal training, coaching, just even basic practice around navigating some of this, how that develops in psychedelic retreats, psychedelic therapy, psychedelic spaces, because it seems like that would be very helpful to have a basic handle on going in, even just a little bit of how to navigate those spaces.
Yeah.
Seems like low-hanging fruit that's just not being explored the way I wish it would. Yeah.
Totally. And it's like, it doesn't take that much. I think it takes someone who's like, really integrated their own stuff to facilitate it. But in terms of like the time and it doesn't take that much to open things up, like you were describing, we were talking about just opening up.
So if you run a psychedelic retreat, message me on Twitter and we'll figure something out.
Yeah.
Or we could start one. Do you got the cash? You want to start up a psychedelic retreat for people? And see what we do?
I don't have the cash. If you have the cash,
me neither. Yeah,
I would like us to
someone give us cash. We'll start one up.
Yeah, I've definitely explored some of these topics, and I'm in the Netherlands at the minute, where it's a bunch of this stuff is more legal, so it's fun. But yeah. If anyone is interested in these topics, message one of us.
Yeah.